Hello, I am Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 here to preview the Mississippi State at Arkansas baseball series this weekend. Big one, a lot on the line for both teams. Arkansas trying to become a national seed, which, barring disaster, it should be. And Mississippi State really has played its way into the hosting mix. And a win here, boy, that would really augment the Bulldogs' chances. We'll get into that in just a minute. I'll break down Mississippi State. I usually do the visitors first. So we'll talk about the Bulldogs, then we'll talk about the Razorbacks, and then at the end, a little bit of on the matchup and what I think will happen and who will win and why. Before we get there, a reminder, our content brought to you by BetOnline. That is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, the NBA, and NHL playoff stats, all the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams, get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet online where the game starts. Let's start with Mississippi State. We'll do the lineup and then the pitching. And State's lineup, no surprise, Dakota Jordan has been their carrying guy all season. He's struggled a little bit lately in SEC play, but I think has rebounded nicely in the last week or so. But I think what's interesting about this lineup is the supporting cast is really starting to help him out. David Mershon has had a very underrated offensive year at shortstop. Logan Kohler, their third baseman, has hit better lately. Hunter Hines, their first baseman, has really picked it up the last couple of weeks. Johnny Long, their catcher, has hit a little bit better. Kiner Hysack, their center fielder, has been really consistent and hit well. They've made a couple of changes. They've pulled Ethan Pulliam to second base and put Amani Larry at the DH, but this is a solid lineup. They take a few walks. They don't strike out a ton, especially Bryce Chance, a guy that's really tough to strike out. He can put the ball in play and keep some innings alive. So this is a good lineup. It may not be a top 3 or 4 lineup in the SEC, but it's a really good one. And this team has a chance to beat anybody when you've got Hunter Hines, who's one of the more talented hitters in the league, hitting, and he's been doing that lately. By the way, State is pretty right-handed heavy. Kohler's a lefty, Hines is a lefty, Mershon's a switch hitter, the rest are right-handed pitchers. So we'll talk about how that plays into the series in just a little bit. On the pitching end for the Bulldogs, Mississippi State has something that most teams would envy. Now, they're not going up against most teams, and we'll talk about Arkansas's pitching in just a minute, but Khal Stephen, Jurrangelo Cijintje, one of the more consistent 1-2 punches in the league, if not the country. Steven. I keep wanting to call him Stephen, but it's Khal Stephen. A 2.96 ERA. Cijintje, a 3.53 ERA. Cijintje, of course, a switch pitcher, although it seems like he's been going one-sided more of late. I think they'll throw Brooks Auger in that third spot. He's been pretty good as a guy that can give you a couple of innings to start things right away. But I think the bigger thing for them, the bullpen. State's got about 4 really good arms that they can throw for multiple innings. One of them is Cam Schulke, the JUCO with the odd arm angles. You see a different thing every time, some games it seems. He's not overpowering, but he is a guy that will not give up a lot of home runs. So that's really valuable in this day and age of college baseball. You've got lefties Tyler Davis and Nolan Stevens are pretty good, particularly Davis. Tyson Harden's been a quality guy for them. Pico Cone's pitched decently well of late. You've got Evan Siri. Siri is, I think, their midweek guy, but they didn't have a midweek game, so maybe he gets called into play. Carson Ligon, the Miami transfer, who's been a little shaky, but you can get something from them. Look, when you go 8, 9, 10 deep into anybody's pitching staff, the numbers aren't going to be vintage Craig Kimbrell or anything like that. So keep that in mind. But I think this is a really solid Mississippi State team across the board, and I think particularly the way they hit up and down the lineup, and I think particularly their 1-2 punch in pitching with enough bullpen guys who can give you multiple innings of quality work, that makes them a tough matchup for just about anybody. Let's get to Arkansas. The Razorbacks did not have a midweek game like the Bulldogs, so pitching should be fresh. And it's a case where the lineup's just been weird. The best 2 hitters, Peyton Stovall, Jared Sprague-Lott, each creating over 10 runs per 27 outs per the Bill James formula I use. And then the rest of the guys are fairly interchangeable. Nolan Souza, the lefty, the DH is a little better than the rest. Ben McLaughlin's had a good year. I neglected to mention him. So really, McLaughlin, Stovall, and Sprague Lotta, your best guys. Aloy has slumped a little bit lately. Hudson White has really picked it up offensively. One of 3 catchers that the Hogs will use, along with Parker Rowland, who's had a big hit or two lately, and Ryder Helfrich. So you've got that. The bench is where it drops off a little bit. Ross Lovich, probably their best guy off the bench. Ty Wilms-Meyer has not had the year that I think Arkansas has expected. But you got some veterans there like Kendall Diggs. Peyton Holt's a good hitter. Look, Arkansas has struggled to score runs at times, and that has gotten people's attention because as good as the pitching staff is, people are going to look at the offense and by comparison, hold them up to that standard, which is not fair. But it's a good lineup, certainly good enough to win games, although they did drop 2 of the last 3 against Kentucky last weekend after dropping the last game to Florida. So anyway, I think the bigger reason for that, though, the pitching, after Hagen Smith, you've seen a little bit of a drop-off lately. Mason Molina, after the injury, has come back. Brady Tigert has struggled a little bit more lately. Will McIntyre, their most used reliever in terms of innings pitched, he's thrown 46 2/3. Has struggled, gotten back a little bit to form, and then started to struggle a little bit again. Some guys in the bullpen, Frank and Wood and Fouch, I think have been hit a little bit here and there. So the Razorbacks, after just really kind of mowing through everybody like a buzzsaw and not giving up many runs to anybody, there started been some cracks lately. And look, that happens to just about every team every year in the SEC. I'm not going to pronounce this a permanent problem and say hit the panic button. But, these guys got hit a little bit after Hagen Smith, who was his usual dominant Hagen Smith self. And the numbers there on him, he's got a 48% strikeout rate. He's got a 12% free pass rate. That's the only thing that you can really knock Hagen Smith for. Sometimes there will be some walks and some hit batsmen on occasion, but you can't hit the guy. You've got a 13% fly ball rate, a 1.6% home run rate, a 1.36 ERA, a 0.89 whip, and I include hit batsmen in that, so it's even better than whip when you've got a base runners per innings pitched, that kind of stature. But they've still got guys. Even much as they've struggled, Gabe Gackel's been great out of the bullpen. McIntyre on balance has been good. I'm going to guess that Arkansas is going to kind of rebound from this again. Every team in the SEC at some point is going to struggle. That is just this league. Right now, I think if you pick the field of 64 teams, you'd probably have 11 teams in the SEC in the big dance. Maybe 10. I don't know. I don't know what you do with some of those bottom feeder teams. But the point I'm trying to make is there's no pass outs in the SEC ever. And so for Arkansas to have a couple of weekends where the pitching isn't as good as it normally is, A, that's an awfully high standard. B, that it seems like it happens to everybody in the SEC at some point, and maybe this was just Arkansas's turn on the wheel. All right, predictions. Lefties for Arkansas out of the rotation, you got Smith, you got Molina, you got Parker Coyle if they use him, Hewlett. Again, this is a predominantly right-handed hitting lineup, although Hunter Hines, one of their better hitters, is a lefty. So take that in consideration. Maybe a little bit of a platoon advantage for State. I don't know what the splits are there, but just going to kind of point that out. Interesting that you got a lot of right-handed hitters for State against lefty starters for Arkansas. It may not matter. Arkansas's guys have been so good. Lefty, righty, it may not matter, especially when you're facing Hagen Smith. But just kind of wanted to point that out. I think this is a series where I usually pick the home team to win series when it's close or somebody's got the clear advantage and that team is the home team. That's what I'm going to do this time. I think Arkansas is due for a little bit of a bounce back after a tough weekend in Lexington against a really fired up team, but don't sleep on Mississippi State. This is a team that I've been saying for a couple of weeks is a really good team. I think they're good enough to go in to Arkansas and at least get a game. That's been tough to do at Baum. Nobody is really much walking into that place and winning. Florida did win the final game of the series a couple of weeks ago, so there is that. Other than that, good luck to you winning in Baum Stadium this year. Great ball team, great environment, great atmosphere. Hogs to win the series. We'll talk about it later. Be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We'll wrap it up later. I'm Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 14, presented by Bet Online.